My name is Angelina, and I'm 25 years old. I built my career as an architect through years of dedication to education, something my stepfather tried to destroy because his son was jealous of my success. When they gave me an ultimatum to quit school, I made the hardest decision of my life. I ghosted my entire family and never looked back. At least until years later, when an unexpected reunion changed everything I thought I knew about family. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you want to hear how I fought for my education and future, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle with my mom, Sarah. We lived in a small but cozy two-bedroom house that always felt like home despite its modest appearance. From the moment I started school, learning came naturally to me. While other kindergartners struggled with their ABCs, I was already reading simple books. My teachers often told my mother I was gifted, but she never put pressure on me. She just provided encouragement and resources whenever possible. My father passed away when I was only 3 years old from a sudden heart attack. I have few memories of him, mostly just the smell of his cologne and the sound of his laugh. My mom kept his memory alive through stories and photographs, but essentially, it had always been just the two of us against the world. Sarah worked as a nurse at a local hospital, often taking double shifts to make ends meet. Despite her exhaustion, she never missed my school events or parent-teacher conferences. She'd sit at our small kitchen table helping me with homework, even after 12-hour shifts, her eyes heavy with fatigue but bright with pride. "Education is the one thing no one can ever take away from you, Angel," she'd tell me. It became our mantra, something I held onto tightly through the years. When I was 13, my mom met James at the hospital where she worked. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative who visited regularly, and their friendship gradually blossomed into romance. James was charming, well-dressed, and seemed genuinely interested in my academic achievements when they first started dating. "Your daughter is exceptionally bright, Sarah," he'd say, examining my report cards filled with A's. "She's going places." 6 months into their relationship, I met James's son, Tyler. He was 15, 2 years older than me, with a permanent scowl and disinterested attitude. Where I was eager and enthusiastic about school, Tyler seemed to view education as a prison sentence. Our first meeting was awkward to say the least. "This is my son, Tyler," James had announced proudly, his hand on Tyler's shoulder. "Tyler, this is Sarah's daughter, Angelina." Tyler barely looked up from his phone. "Whatever," he muttered. I tried to engage him, asking about his interests and school, but his answers were monosyllabic and dismissive. Still, I remained hopeful that we might become friends eventually. I'd always wanted a sibling after all. James and my mom married when I was 14 in a small ceremony at a local park. They looked happy, and I was genuinely pleased for my mother. She deserved love and support after years of doing everything alone. We moved into James's larger house in a more upscale neighborhood, and I enrolled in a new school with better resources and advanced programs. The first few months of our blended family seemed promising. James continued to praise my academic achievements, and my mother appeared happier than I'd seen her in years. But beneath the surface, tensions were brewing. Tyler's attitude toward me grew increasingly hostile as my perfect grades continued while he struggled to maintain C's and D's. "Did you ace another test?" James would ask when I'd come home from school. When I'd nod, he'd glance at Tyler, whose jaw would tighten visibly. "That's great, but maybe don't make such a big deal about it. Not everyone finds school as easy as you do." These small comments began to accumulate, creating an atmosphere where I felt I needed to downplay my achievements. Once I found my science project, which had taken weeks to complete, damaged the night before it was due. When I tearfully told my mother and James, Tyler claimed innocence. "Kids are competitive," James said with a shrug. "I'm sure it was just an accident. Maybe you shouldn't leave important things lying around." My mother frowned but didn't contradict him. I stayed up all night recreating my project and still managed to win first place. I noticed my mother didn't mention my win at dinner that night, her eyes darting nervously to James, as if seeking permission to be proud of me. That first year of our new family arrangement established a pattern. My successes became sources of tension rather than celebration. I began hiding my achievements, slipping test papers into my backpack rather than showing them to my parents. I started spending more time in my room studying, avoiding the living room where Tyler and James would watch sports and bond over their shared interests. My relationship with my mother shifted too. She began checking with James before making decisions about my education or activities. The woman who had once fiercely advocated for every opportunity for me now seemed tentative, more concerned with keeping peace in the household than nurturing my potential. "Just try to get along with Tyler," she'd whisper when we were alone. "He's having a hard time adjusting. James says he's always struggled with confidence." I tried. I genuinely tried to connect with my stepbrother, offering to help him with homework or including him in conversations. But each attempt was met with sullen resistance or outright rejection. "I don't need your charity," he snapped once when I offered to explain a math concept he was struggling with. "Stop acting like you're so much better than everyone." I retreated further into my studies, finding solace in books and learning what I couldn't find at home anymore, a sense of accomplishment and worth. What I didn't realize then was that this retreat was only the beginning of a much more painful journey. By the time I entered high school, the dynamic in our house had solidified into something toxic. I was enrolled in all honors classes and had joined several academic clubs, while Tyler was barely passing standard courses and had been suspended twice for skipping school. The contrast between us couldn't have been more stark, and it fueled a resentment that grew more palpable by the day. My freshman year, I discovered a passion for architecture after taking a design elective. Something about the blend of creativity, mathematics, and practical problem-solving resonated deeply with me. I began staying after school to use the design software in the computer lab, sketching building concepts, and studying famous architects in my free time. My art teacher, Ms. Reynolds, noticed my enthusiasm and took me under her wing. "You have a remarkable spatial intelligence, Angelina," she told me. "Have you considered pursuing architecture as a career?" That conversation planted a seed that would eventually become my life's direction. I threw myself into related subjects, advanced math, physics, art, and design. Every new concept I mastered felt like another building block toward a future I was constructing for myself. At home, however, my growing focus and ambition were met with increasing resistance. Tyler's jealousy manifested in small acts of sabotage. He'd accidentally spill drinks on my sketches or create loud disturbances when I was trying to study. Once my graphing calculator disappeared right before a major exam, only to reappear mysteriously in the garage a week later. When I brought these incidents to James's attention, he invariably minimized them. "That's just normal sibling rivalry," he'd say dismissively. "You need to toughen up if you're going to succeed in the real world." My mother would look troubled but remained silent during these exchanges. In private, she'd apologize, but her solutions were always for me to adapt rather than addressing Tyler's behavior. "Maybe you could study at the library instead," she suggested after another of my projects was damaged. "Or keep your things in your room where they're safer." The message was clear: it was my responsibility to work around Tyler's hostility rather than his responsibility to change his behavior. The situation escalated during my sophomore year when I entered a statewide academic competition for young engineers and architects. For months, I worked on my submission, a sustainable community center design that incorporated renewable energy solutions and accessible spaces. The night I learned I'd won first place, I came home bursting with excitement. The award included a cash prize recognition at a prestigious ceremony, and most importantly, a summer workshop with professional architects. "Guess what?" I announced at dinner, unable to contain my joy. "I won the state engineering competition." There was a brief moment of stunned silence before my mother smiled. "That's wonderful, honey. Isn't that wonderful, James?" James glanced at Tyler, who was stabbing his food aggressively. "It's nice," he said flatly. "But you know, not everyone gets to be in those fancy competitions." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my elation dimming. "It means you're showing off," Tyler snapped. "Like always." "I'm not showing off. I'm sharing good news with my family," I protested. James set down his fork. "Angelina, you need to be more sensitive to others' feelings. Tyler had a tough day. He found out he didn't make the baseball team. Your timing is inconsiderate." I looked to my mother for support, but she was staring at her plate. "Maybe we can celebrate your news another time," she suggested quietly. I excused myself from the table and cried in my room that night. No one came to check on me or congratulate me properly. The next morning, life continued as if my achievement had never happened. This pattern repeated itself throughout high school. Any recognition I received was downplayed or treated as an inconvenience. Meanwhile, Tyler's minimal efforts were praised extravagantly. When he finally managed to get a B- in English, James took the entire family out for an expensive dinner in celebration. "See what happens when you apply yourself," James told him proudly. "You're just as smart as anyone when you try." The message wasn't subtle. Tyler's mediocre performance was worthy of celebration, while my consistent excellence was expected and therefore unremarkable. I found refuge with Ms. Reynolds, who continued to mentor me throughout high school. Her classroom became my sanctuary during lunch periods and after school. She was the one who attended my award ceremonies when my family made excuses not to come. She was the one who encouraged me to apply for specialized summer programs and helped me start thinking about college. "Don't let anyone dim your light, Angelina," she told me once when I confided in her about the situation at home. "Some people feel threatened by brightness they can't match." As my junior year approached, Tyler's academic situation grew more dire. He was failing multiple classes and had been caught cheating on a midterm exam. James managed to talk the school out of suspension, but Tyler was placed on academic probation. It was around this time that James suggested family therapy. I was initially hopeful perhaps a professional could help address the dysfunctional dynamics in our home, but after just 2 sessions, it became clear that the therapist was being manipulated by James's perspective. "Angelina, do you think you might be contributing to the tension by always setting such a high bar?" the therapist asked during our second session. "Sometimes in families we need to meet others where they are." I looked at James and Tyler, who were both nodding in agreement, then at my mother, who was examining her hands in her lap. In that moment, I realized that no one in that room was going to advocate for my right to excel. I would have to do that for myself. Junior year was pivotal. While most of my classmates were just beginning to think seriously about college, I had been planning for years. My wall was covered with brochures from top architecture programs, and my grades and extracurricular activities were specifically tailored toward making me an ideal candidate. That spring, I was accepted into a prestigious 6-week summer architecture program at Cornell University. Only 20 students nationwide were selected, and the program would include mentorship from leading architects' portfolio development and college credit. It was a dream opportunity, and Ms. Reynolds had written me a glowing recommendation. The acceptance email arrived during school hours, and I could barely contain my excitement all day. This was the kind of opportunity that could shape my entire future. I printed the acceptance letter to show my family, hoping that even they would recognize the significance of this achievement. That evening, I came home to find my mother and James sitting solemnly at the dining table. "We need to have a family meeting," James said. "Tyler will be down in a minute." My news would have to wait, I realized. I sat down, clutching my letter in my pocket. When Tyler joined us looking bored and disinterested as usual, James cleared his throat. "We need to discuss the family's direction going forward, particularly regarding education." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "Tyler has been struggling, as we all know," James continued. "He's been rejected from several colleges already, and his guidance counselor suggests he may need to take a gap year to improve his application." My mother nodded sympathetically. Tyler stared at the table. Meanwhile, James turned to me. "Angelina continues to pursue an aggressive academic track that frankly is creating an unhealthy atmosphere in our home." "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "We think," James said, gesturing between himself and my mother, "that it might be best for family harmony if you considered taking a step back from some of your academic pursuits." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A step back. What does that mean exactly? "Maybe consider community college for 2 years instead of those expensive universities you're looking at," James suggested. "Or take a gap year yourself. Focus on family for a while instead of always chasing the next achievement." I looked at my mother in disbelief. "Mom, is this how you feel too?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "I just want everyone to be happy, Angelina. The constant competition isn't healthy." "There wouldn't be competition if Tyler did his own work instead of resenting me for doing mine," I argued, my voice rising. "Why should I diminish my future because he refuses to build his—" Tyler's face flushed with anger. Not everyone wants to be a stuck-up know-it-all like you. That's enough, James said sharply. This is exactly the problem. Your attitude, Angelina, creates conflict. I pulled out my acceptance letter, my hand shaking. I got into the summer architecture program at Cornell. Only 20 students in the country were selected. This could help me get into any architecture program in the country. Instead of congratulations, there was a heavy silence. When is this program? James finally asked. 6 weeks in June and July. All expenses paid. James exchanged a look with my mother. That won't work with our family vacation to Lake Tahoe. We've already put down deposits. I wasn't told about any vacation, I said, confused. We were going to surprise everyone, my mother said weakly. It's been planned for months. I later discovered this was a lie. The vacation had been hastily planned after Tyler's college rejections as a consolation. You'll have to decline the program, James stated firmly. Family comes first, Angelina. This is about my future, I protested. And this attitude is exactly why we're concerned, James said. Your mother and I have discussed this thoroughly, and we feel it's time for an ultimatum. My blood ran cold at that word. Ultimatum. Either you agree to tone down your academic pursuits to create a more harmonious family environment, or we will withdraw our financial support for your education beyond high school. I couldn't breathe. My college fund money that my real father had started and my mother had contributed to for years was being held hostage. Mom. I turned to her, desperate for her to stand up for me. She was crying silently. Please, Angelina, just work with us here. Family harmony is important too. This isn't about family harmony, I said, my voice breaking. This is about making me smaller so Tyler doesn't have to feel inadequate. That's a very selfish perspective, James said coldly. I'm disappointed in you. I stood up, still clutching my acceptance letter. I need to think about this. That night I couldn't sleep. How had my education, something my mother had always told me was sacred, become a bargaining chip? How could she betray everything she'd ever taught me? The next day, I approached my mother when she was alone, hoping to reason with her. Mom, you always told me education was the one thing no one could take away from me. Why are you letting James take it now? Her eyes were red from crying. It's complicated, Angel. James feels that I've favored you over Tyler, that I haven't been fair. He says it's created Tyler's problems. That's not true, and you know it, I said. Tyler makes his own choices. He's struggling so much, honey. He needs more support right now. And I don't, I asked incredulously. I've worked so hard for everything I've achieved. She hugged me tightly. I know you have. But you're so smart and capable. You'll be fine no matter what. Tyler needs more help. In that moment, I realized my strength had become my weakness in this family. Because I was capable, my needs were deemed less important. The situation deteriorated rapidly after that. During another heated argument about my Cornell program, James finally showed his true colors. You're not even my real daughter, he snapped when I accused him of favoritism. I'm trying to do what's best for this family, but you're too selfish to see it. Tyler smirked from the doorway, clearly satisfied to see me put in my place. My mother gasped, but offered no defense. The final betrayal came when I discovered through a bank statement accidentally left on the counter that significant withdrawals had been made from my college fund. When confronted, James admitted the money had been used to buy Tyler a car and pay for his summer sports camp. We can replenish it later, he said dismissively. Tyler needed a boost to his self-esteem right now. That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. If my family wouldn't support my education, I would find a way to do it myself. I would not allow James and Tyler's insecurities to determine my future. I would not diminish myself to make others comfortable with their own mediocrity. I would leave, and I would succeed without them. My escape plan had to be meticulous. With graduation approaching, I had limited time and resources, but I was determined to take control of my future. First, I made an appointment with my school counselor, Ms. Garcia. I explained my situation without emotional embellishment, simply stating the facts. My parents were unwilling to support my college education unless I agreed to compromise my academic goals. Ms. Garcia was appalled but practical. Let's look at your options, Angelina. With your grades and achievements, there are significant scholarship opportunities available. We spent hours over the next few weeks completing scholarship applications, filing for financial aid as an independent student, and researching affordable housing options near my top choice universities. I applied for every grant and work-study program available. Meanwhile, I took a part-time job at a local coffee shop working weekends and evenings. I told my parents it was for spending money, but every dollar went into a new bank account they knew nothing about. I arranged for electronic statements, only leaving no paper trail. I continued to excel academically, maintaining my perfect GPA despite the emotional turmoil at home. When the announcement came that I would be graduating as valedictorian, the tension at home reached a breaking point. "Do you have to accept?" my mother asked hesitantly. "Tyler's already feeling bad about barely graduating. Your speech would just highlight the difference." I stared at her, no longer surprised by these requests to diminish myself. "Yes, Mom. I have to accept. This is my achievement and I've earned it." James was less subtle. "This is exactly the kind of thing we talked about. Always putting yourself first, never considering how it affects others." I bit back the obvious retort that Tyler's feelings were apparently more important than mine and simply said, "I won't turn down this honor." Graduation day arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. As I stood at the podium delivering my valedictorian speech about perseverance and future potential, I scanned the audience. My mother was there, dabbing at tears with a tissue. James sat stone-faced beside her. Tyler had claimed illness and stayed home. Afterward, there was no celebration dinner, no congratulations party. James muttered something about my speech being showy and suggested we get fast food on the way home. My mother squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm proud of you," when James wasn't looking. That night, I finalized my plans. The acceptances had come in. I'd received a substantial scholarship to the University of Washington's architecture program, along with grants that would cover most of my expenses. I'd secured a position as a resident advisor in a freshman dorm, which would provide free housing and a small stipend. Between that and my growing savings, I could make it work. Ms. Reynolds had offered her spare room for the summer until dorms opened, and I'd already moved most of my important possessions there. Bit by bit, my architecture portfolios, my most treasured books, the jewelry my real father had left for me, photographs and mementos I couldn't bear to lose. 2 weeks after graduation, when James and Tyler were away at a baseball game, I packed the last of my essential belongings into 2 suitcases. I left a letter on my perfectly made bed. "Mom, I can't continue to live in an environment where my success is treated as a problem to be solved. I've secured a scholarship to UW and will be living on campus. I've found a way to fund my education without the college fund that was meant for me. I love you, but I can't stay in a home where I'm expected to make myself smaller for others' comfort. When you're ready to support my right to pursue my education and goals without conditions, you can reach me at this email address. I won't be taking my phone as I know James pays the bill and would use it to track me. Please respect my decision and my boundaries. Angelina." I didn't leave contact information for James or Tyler. I had no more words for them. Ms. Reynolds was waiting in her car around the corner. When I climbed in with my suitcases, she didn't ask if I was sure about my decision. She simply said, "I'm proud of you for valuing yourself enough to make this choice." Living with Miss Reynolds that summer was healing. Her home was peaceful, filled with art and books with no undercurrents of resentment or manipulation. For the first time in years, I could simply exist without constantly monitoring others' reactions to my achievements. I got a job at an architectural supply store, building my savings and learning about materials from professionals who came to shop. I began to create a new network of contacts and mentors who valued exactly what James and Tyler had resented: my intelligence, drive, and passion for architecture. The hardest part was the separation from my mother. She emailed a few times, her messages full of worry and pleas to come home. "James feels terrible," she wrote. "He says we can discuss the college situation again." I responded factually, but kindly explaining that I had secured my own path forward and no longer needed their financial support. I told her I needed time and space to heal, and that any relationship moving forward would require respect for my boundaries and ambitions. Her emails became less frequent as summer progressed. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that James was furious about my departure, calling it childish and ungrateful. Tyler apparently found the whole situation amusing, telling friends I was too stuck up to be part of a real family. When fall semester began, I threw myself into my studies. Architecture school was challenging in the best possible way, pushing me to grow while validating my natural abilities. I made friends with like-minded students who celebrated each other's successes instead of resenting them. The holidays were the hardest. I spent Thanksgiving with Ms. Reynolds and Christmas with my roommate's family, who welcomed me warmly but couldn't fill the hollow space where my own family should have been. I sent my mother a card each holiday, but received no response. Through a high school friend, I learned that my mother and James had told people I was taking time to find myself, rather than admitting I'd left home and was succeeding on my own. My achievements were being erased from the family narrative, just as they'd been minimized when I lived at home. Campus housing meant I had no worries during school breaks, as I'd arranged to work extra hours at the architectural supply store during these periods to maintain my apartment access. I became known as the resident advisor, who never went home, always available to the few international students who couldn't travel for holidays. Working multiple jobs while maintaining academic excellence was exhausting, but also empowering. Every challenge I overcame, every obstacle I navigated, proved that I didn't need James's conditional support or my mother's compromised protection. I was building my own life brick by brick, just as I hoped to design buildings someday. My chosen family expanded. Reynolds remained a constant support. My academic advisor became a mentor. Classmates became close friends who understood my passion and drive. A study group formed in my sophomore year became my inner circle people who celebrated my successes and supported me through difficult times. When I graduated with honors from my undergraduate program 4 years later, these were the people who cheered from the audience. Through professional connections and a portfolio that showcased my unique vision, I secured an entry-level position at a respected Seattle architecture firm. At 22, I had accomplished what James had told me would be impossible without his support. I had earned my degree, established myself in my chosen field, and created a life filled with people who valued me completely without conditions or resentment. But despite these achievements, there remained an ache where my original family should have been, particularly for my mother, who had raised me alone for so many years before allowing James to come between us. That pain would unexpectedly resurface 5 years after I'd left home, challenging everything I thought I knew about family and forgiveness. 5 years after ghosting my family, I had established myself as a promising young architect in Seattle. At 27, I had advanced from an entry-level position to a project lead at my firm, specializing in sustainable urban housing developments. My designs had won several regional awards, and I'd recently been featured in a professional journal as an emerging talent to watch. My apartment was a source of particular pride, a modern one-bedroom in a converted warehouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and industrial details. I'd designed the interior myself, creating a space that was both functional and beautiful. Every piece of furniture, every design element represented a choice I'd made for myself, free from anyone else's influence or judgment. I had colleagues who respected my work, and even a small but growing circle of clients who specifically requested me for their projects. By all external measures, I was thriving. Yet there remained an emptiness that success couldn't fill the absence of my mother and the family connection I'd once known. Major milestones highlighted this absence most painfully. When I received my first major design award, there was no mother in the audience beaming with pride. When I was promoted, there was no family dinner to celebrate. I'd built a good life, but the foundation still felt incomplete. I rarely allowed myself to wonder about my former family. What little information reached me came through mutual acquaintances or old high school friends I occasionally encountered. I knew that my mother and James were still together, that Tyler had struggled to hold jobs after college, and that they still lived in the same house. Beyond these basic facts, I maintained my distance, both physical and emotional. That carefully constructed separation shattered one rainy Tuesday when I literally bumped into Ava Martinez, a former classmate, at a coffee shop near my office. "Angelina," she exclaimed, steadying her coffee. "I was just thinking about you recently. How have you been?" We settled at a small table exchanging the usual updates on careers and mutual acquaintances. Then Ava's expression grew serious. "I don't know if you keep in touch with your family at all," she said hesitantly. "But I thought you should know your mom hasn't been well. My mother ran into her at the hospital. She's been having treatments for breast cancer." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Cancer," I repeated numbly. "How long? How serious?" "I don't know the details," Ava admitted. "But Mom said she looked thin and tired. She mentioned your name, apparently wondered if my mom ever heard from you." That night I couldn't sleep. The thought of my mother ill, possibly dying without me ever having reconciled with her was unbearable. Yet years of silence stretched between us, and I wasn't sure if my presence would be welcome or an additional stress she didn't need. I called Ms. Reynolds, now retired, but still a trusted advisor. "I don't know what to do," I confessed. "Part of me wants to rush to her side, but I'm afraid of encountering James and Tyler, of being pulled back into that toxic dynamic." "What does your heart tell you?" she asked simply. "That she's my mother. That despite everything, I still love her." "Then perhaps it's time to establish contact cautiously with boundaries intact." The next day, I began researching discreetly, asking mutual acquaintances about my mother's condition. What I learned was concerning but not immediately dire stage 2 breast cancer, responding to treatment, prognosis generally positive with proper care. I also discovered something unexpected. My mother and James had separated nearly 2 years ago. They weren't officially divorced but were living apart. This information came from Claire, another former classmate whose mother belonged to the same church as Sarah. "Your mom moved into a small apartment near the hospital where she works," Claire told me over coffee. "James still lives in the house. No one knows exactly what happened, but there were rumors of financial problems." This new information shifted my perspective. Without James as a gatekeeper, perhaps reconciliation with my mother was possible. Still, I hesitated. Years of silence couldn't be bridged with a simple phone call or text. What if she rejected me? What if she blamed me for leaving? What if she was still under James's influence despite the separation? My therapist, whom I'd been seeing since my second year of college to work through the family trauma, offered valuable guidance. "You can reach out without sacrificing the boundaries you've established," Dr. Winters advised. "Make contact on your terms in a way that feels safe for you." After much consideration, I composed an email to my mother's work address, which I found through the hospital directory. "Mom, I've heard about your health challenges and wanted to reach out. I hope your treatments are going well and that you have the support you need during this difficult time. If you're open to reconnecting, I would like to hear from you. My life has taken positive directions and I've thought of you often despite our estrangement. Angelina." Simple, direct, without apology for my departure, but offering an opening for communication. I hit send before I could second guess myself. 3 days later, her response arrived. "Angelina, seeing your name in my inbox brought tears to my eyes. Yes, I've been ill, but the prognosis is good. The treatments are difficult but working. There's so much I want to say to you, so much I need to apologize for. James and I are separated now, have been for almost 2 years. It's given me a lot of time to reflect on the mistakes I made, especially with you. I would very much like to see you if you're willing. No pressure, and I understand if you need more time. Love always, Mom." We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between my office and her apartment. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize her. The vibrant, energetic woman I remembered had been replaced by someone who looked much older than her 52 years. Cancer treatments had left her thin and pale, her once thick hair now a short silver cap growing back after chemotherapy. Yet when she saw me, her face lit up with the smile I remembered from childhood before James and Tyler had entered our lives. "Angelina," she said, her voice breaking. "My beautiful girl." We embraced awkwardly, years of separation, creating a physical hesitation that matched our emotional uncertainty. As we settled at a corner table with tea, the initial conversation was careful, focused on safe topics: my work, her treatment schedule, the unusually rainy spring Seattle was experiencing. Gradually, as the tension eased, we ventured into more difficult territory. I failed you, she said, suddenly setting down her cup. As a mother, my first responsibility was to protect you and support your dreams. Instead, I let James convince me that his way was better, that your success was somehow hurting Tyler. Why? I asked the question that had haunted me for years. You always told me education was sacred, that no one could take it away. Then you helped James try to take it. She wiped away tears. I was afraid of losing him, of being alone again. He was so good at making his perspective seem reasonable, at making me doubt myself. He'd say things like, "If you really loved Tyler like a son, you'd understand," or, "A real mother would want harmony above individual achievement." Classic manipulation, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Yes, she agreed quietly. I see that now. It took me years to recognize how he controlled the narrative, how he pitted everyone against each other while positioning himself as the reasonable one. She explained how things had deteriorated after I left. Without me as the family scapegoat, James had turned his manipulative tactics on her. Meanwhile, Tyler dropped out of community college after one semester and cycled through a series of jobs, never holding one for more than a few months. James always made excuses for him, always blamed external factors rather than holding Tyler accountable, she said. The money became a huge issue. James had spent most of our savings on Tyler's failures, paying off debts, buying him new cars after he wrecked them, bailing him out of legal troubles. The final straw came when James remortgaged the house without telling her to pay for Tyler's stint in an expensive rehabilitation facility after a DUI arrest. I found out when the bank called about a missed payment, she said. He'd forged my signature on the papers. That's when I finally left. The cancer diagnosis had come 6 months after the separation, adding another layer of challenge to her already difficult situation. But she spoke about it with surprising equanimity. In a strange way, the cancer helped me find clarity, she explained. When you face your mortality, you see what truly matters. And what mattered most was trying to make amends with you before it was too late. I reached across the table and took her hand. I never stopped loving you, Mom. I was angry and hurt, but you were always in my heart. I've tried to keep track of you from a distance, she admitted. I saw the article about you in the architectural journal. I've driven by buildings you've worked on just to feel connected to you somehow. We agreed to proceed cautiously with rebuilding our relationship. I wasn't ready to dive back into full family intimacy, and she respected that. We would meet weekly for lunch or coffee, gradually reestablishing trust and connection. As we were preparing to leave, she hesitated. There's something else you should know. Tyler has been asking about you. My body tensed involuntarily. What about me? He's changed, Angelina. The rehabilitation wasn't just for the DUI, he's been working through a lot of issues. He's been sober for 18 months now, and he's been talking about the past, about how he treated you. I shook my head, not ready to process this information. One step at a time, Mom. I'm glad he's getting help, but I'm not ready to go there yet. She nodded, understanding. Of course. I just wanted you to know. As I walked her to her car, she turned to me suddenly. I never said it back then, but I want you to know now I am so proud of what you've accomplished, Angelina. You did it all on your own, despite us, rather than because of us. That shows extraordinary strength of character. Her words healed something deep inside me, a wound that had been open for years. For the first time since I'd left home, I felt the possibility of true reconciliation with at least one part of my past. But the most challenging confrontations were yet to come. Over the next several months, my mother and I carefully rebuilt our relationship. We started with weekly coffee meetings, then progressed to occasional dinners and visits to her apartment. I helped her through her final rounds of radiation therapy, sitting in hospital waiting rooms that brought back memories of her once working those same halls as a nurse. The more time we spent together, the more I could see how profoundly James had manipulated our family dynamic. My mother shared stories of how he would speak differently about me when I wasn't present, subtly undermining my accomplishments and painting me as selfish or inconsiderate. He had effectively isolated her from friends who might have questioned his perspective, creating an echo chamber where his distorted viewpoint became her reality. It's embarrassing to admit how completely I fell for it, she confessed during one of our conversations. I was so afraid of failing as a mother to both you and Tyler that I let James convince me his way was best. By the time I realized what was happening, the damage was done and you were gone. As her health improved, so did our relationship. I introduced her to some of my friends, including my closest friend from architecture school, Zoe, who had become like a sister to me over the years. Mom started attending my professional events when she felt well enough, beaming with genuine pride as colleagues praised my work. 6 months into our reconciliation, she brought up Tyler again. We were having dinner at my apartment looking through old photographs she'd brought pictures of me as a child that I hadn't seen in years. "Tyler's been asking to talk to you," she said carefully, setting down a photo of me at my elementary school science fair. "He's in a much better place now. He's been working as a peer counselor at the rehabilitation center where he got sober." I set down my wine glass. "Mom, I appreciate that he's doing better, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "I understand," she said quickly, "and I would never pressure you. I think he genuinely wants to make amends." "Why now, after all these years?" "Part of his recovery program involves making amends to people he's harmed," she explained. "But it's more than that. When James had his stroke—" "Stroke?" I interrupted. "James had a stroke." She looked startled. "I thought I'd mentioned it. It happened about 2 months ago. It was severe. He's in a rehabilitation facility now with partial paralysis on his right side and speech difficulties." I sat back, unsure how to feel about this news. I had carried anger toward James for so long that it had become part of my identity. The image of him weakened and vulnerable didn't align with the manipulative, controlling man who had tried to dim my future. "Is he going to recover?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine concern. "Partially. He'll likely need assisted living for the foreseeable future. The doctors say he may regain some speech function, but the right side paralysis is probably permanent." I nodded, processing this information. "You mentioned this had something to do with Tyler wanting to speak with me." "Yes." She sighed. "Seeing his father so diminished seems to have triggered something in Tyler. He's been doing a lot of reflecting on family dynamics, on the way James pitted you two against each other. He talks about wanting to break cycles, about not carrying toxic patterns forward." I remained skeptical. "And you believe this change is genuine?" "I do," she said thoughtfully. "He's not the same angry young man you knew. There's a humility to him now that was never there before. But Angelina, this is entirely your decision. If you're not ready, or if you never want to see him again, that's completely valid." I appreciated her respect for my boundaries, something the old Sarah under James's influence would never have demonstrated. It was evidence of her own growth and healing. "I'll think about it." I promised, not committing further, and I did think about it, discussing the situation with Dr. Winters in our therapy sessions and with my closest friends. Part of me was curious about the person Tyler had become, while another part feared being pulled back into old, painful dynamics. After 2 weeks of consideration, I agreed to meet Tyler at a coffee shop near my office, neutral territory, where I could easily leave if things became uncomfortable. I arrived early, securing a corner table that offered both privacy and a clear path to the exit. When Tyler walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. The sullen, overweight teenager had been replaced by a lean, serious-looking man of 30. His once perpetually sneering expression was now thoughtful, his movements deliberate rather than aggressive. He spotted me and approached hesitantly, as if afraid I might bolt. "Angelina, thank you for agreeing to meet me." I gestured to the chair across from me. "I was curious about what you had to say." He sat down, hands wrapped around his coffee cup. "I wouldn't blame you if you told me to go to hell," he began. "What I did, how I treated you, was inexcusable." His directness surprised me. I had expected excuses or minimization, not this straightforward acknowledgement. "Why did you hate me so much?" I asked the question that had haunted me for years. "I tried to be your friend when our parents married." Tyler looked down at his hands. "I never hated you, not really. I was jealous and insecure. Before you came along, I was the center of my dad's world. He overlooked my failures, praised my minimal efforts. Then suddenly, there was you, smart, motivated, accomplished, making me look like the loser I feared I was." "That wasn't my intention," I said. "I know that now. He nodded. But back then, every time you succeeded, it highlighted my failures. And my dad, he made it worse. Tyler explained how James had constantly compared them behind my back, using my achievements as a whip to motivate Tyler, while simultaneously undermining me to boost Tyler's ego. He'd say things like, Angelina only does well because she has no social life, or she's book smart but lacks common sense, Tyler admitted. He painted this picture of you as one-dimensional and weird, while assuring me that my street smarts were more valuable in the real world. I listened, pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. He played us against each other. Exactly, Tyler said, a flash of anger crossing his face. He created this competition where I could never measure up academically, and you could never be normal enough. It gave him control over both of us. As our conversation continued, Tyler shared his journey through failure addiction and eventual recovery. After I left, his life had spiraled downward. Without me as the family scapegoat, he became the focus of James's manipulative tactics. His continued failures in school and work led to drinking, then drugs, then a series of DUIs and petty offenses. The last time I got arrested, Dad refused to bail me out, he recalled. It was actually the best thing he ever did for me. I had to face the consequences of my choices for once. That's when I finally entered a serious recovery program. Through therapy and 12-step work, Tyler had begun to recognize the toxic patterns in his relationship with James. He'd moved out of the family home, gotten sober, and started working as a peer counselor for other young men struggling with addiction and family trauma. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said earnestly. What I did was wrong, and I own that completely. I just wanted you to know that I understand now how badly I treated you, and I'm truly sorry for my part in driving you away from your mother. His apology seemed genuine, lacking the manipulative undertones I'd feared. Still, I maintained my emotional distance, unwilling to rush into trust after so many years of hurt. Thank you for saying that, I said carefully. It helps to understand what was happening from your perspective. As our meeting drew to a close, Tyler hesitated. There's one more thing. Dad's been asking about you since his stroke. I stiffened. I'm not interested in seeing James. I understand, Tyler said quickly. And I wouldn't normally ask, but his condition is worse than Mom probably told you. The doctors don't expect him to recover much more function than he has now. He's not the same person who tried to control your future. Why would he want to see me? I asked skeptically. He made it very clear I wasn't his real daughter. I think facing his mortality has changed him, Tyler said. He cries when your name is mentioned. That never would have happened before the stroke. I shook my head. I appreciate your honesty today, Tyler, but seeing James is a step I'm not ready to take. He nodded in understanding. Of course. It was worth asking, but I respect your decision. We parted with an awkward handshake. Both of us changed by years and experiences, no longer the hostile teenagers forced into false siblinghood. That night, I called my mother to share my impressions of the meeting with Tyler. He seems different, I admitted. More self-aware, less defensive. He is, she confirmed. The work he's done on himself is substantial. It took hitting rock bottom for him to see how destructive the family patterns were. I hesitated before asking, he mentioned James wants to see me. Is that true? Her sigh carried through the phone line. Yes. Since the stroke, he's been emotional, often crying and saying your name. The neurologist says it could be the brain damage affecting his emotional regulation, or it could be genuine remorse. Perhaps both. I don't know if I can face him, I confessed. There's still so much anger there. You don't owe him anything, Angelina, she assured me. Whatever you decide is the right decision for you. Over the next week, I found myself distracted at work, my thoughts repeatedly returning to the question of whether to see James. I discussed it extensively with Dr. Winters, who helped me explore my motivations and potential outcomes. What would you hope to gain from such a meeting? She asked. Closure, maybe, I reflected. The chance to say things I never got to say when I left. And what concerns you about it? That he'll manipulate me somehow, even in his weakened state. That I'll regret opening that door. Dr. Winters nodded thoughtfully. Those are valid concerns. Remember that you can establish boundaries for any such meeting, its location, duration, who else is present. You have agency now that you didn't have as a teenager in his home. After much reflection, I made my decision. If I truly wanted to heal completely, I needed to confront the person who had caused so much damage, not for his benefit, but for my own closure. I called Tyler and agreed to visit James at the rehabilitation facility with both Tyler and my mother present as buffers. We set the date for the following Saturday, giving me time to prepare emotionally for what would surely be a challenging encounter. The night before the meeting, I barely slept, rehearsing what I might say, imagining various scenarios. By morning, I had reached a place of calm resolve. I would speak my truth, listen if appropriate, and leave with my dignity intact, regardless of James's response. As I drove to the facility with my mother beside me and Tyler following in his own car, I felt a strange sense of coming full circle. 8 years after ghosting my family to preserve my future, I was voluntarily walking back into their orbit, but this time on my own terms. The rehabilitation facility was modern and clinical, with bland artwork and the faint smell of disinfectant. As we walked down the corridor to James's room, I felt a surreal disconnect. This sterile environment seemed an unlikely setting for the emotional confrontation I had imagined countless times over the years. Tyler and my mother flanked me protectively, both aware of the magnitude of this moment. When we reached the door, my mother touched my arm gently. "You can change your mind," she reminded me. "Or if you want to leave at any point, just say the word." I appreciated her support, a stark contrast to the woman who had once chosen James's manipulation over my well-being. "I'll be okay," I assured her, squaring my shoulders. Tyler knocked lightly before opening the door. "Dad, we're here. Angelina's here." The man in the hospital bed barely resembled the domineering James I remembered. Stroke and illness had ravaged his once robust frame, leaving him gaunt and diminished. The right side of his face drooped noticeably, and his right arm lay motionless atop the blanket. His hair, once dark brown with distinguished gray at the temples, was now completely white and sparse. When he saw me, his eyes widened, and he made an unintelligible sound, lifting his left hand in a weak gesture. A nurse standing nearby adjusted his position. "He's been looking forward to your visit all morning," she explained, smiling. "I'll give you some privacy, but press the call button if you need anything." After she left, an awkward silence filled the room. I remained near the door, not yet ready to approach the bed. "Angel, Ina," James managed, his speech slurred but recognizable. "You came." I nodded, unsure what to say. All my rehearsed speeches seemed inappropriate in the face of his physical condition. "Sit." He gestured to a chair beside the bed with his functioning left hand. After a moment's hesitation, I moved forward and perched on the edge of the chair, still maintaining as much distance as possible. My mother and Tyler positioned themselves on the other side of the bed, their presence reassuring. James's eyes filled with tears as he looked at me, an expression I had never seen on his face before. "Sorry," he said, the word thick and difficult. "So sorry." "For what exactly?" I asked, needing specificity rather than a blanket apology. He struggled to speak, frustration evident as words failed him. Tyler stepped in gently. "Dad's speech is limited since the stroke. He's been working with speech therapists, but complex thoughts are difficult to express. He wrote some things down that he wanted to say to you." Tyler retrieved a notebook from the bedside table. "Would it be okay if I read them?" I nodded, preferring this indirect communication to watching James struggle. Tyler opened the notebook and began reading. "Angelina, I failed you as a stepfather. I was jealous of your intelligence and drive because it highlighted my failures with Tyler. Instead of supporting two bright young people to thrive in different ways, I tried to dim your light to make his seem brighter. It was wrong and cruel." I listened silently, watching James's face. Tears streamed down his uneven features as Tyler continued reading. "When you left, I told myself you were selfish and ungrateful. It took years for me to admit that I drove you away with impossible choices. Seeing what you've accomplished without any support from me has shown me how wrong I was. Your success is a testament to your character and determination. I am sorry for every time I made you feel less than the exceptional person you are." The words were startlingly self-aware coming from James, even filtered through Tyler's voice. Part of me wondered if the stroke had fundamentally altered his personality, or if facing mortality had forced genuine reflection. "Why now?" I asked when Tyler finished reading. "Why after all these years?" James gestured weakly toward his body, indicating his condition. "The stroke gave him perspective," Tyler translated. "He's been doing a lot of thinking about his life, his regrets." "I regret most," James managed to articulate, looking directly at me. I sat with these words, feeling neither the vindication nor the anger I had expected. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of sadness for the wasted years and a strange sense of freedom. Seeing James so diminished, hearing his apology, however belated, released something that had been tightly wound inside me for years. "I want you to know something," I said, finding my voice. "I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because I was strong enough to value myself when no one else in this family did. I refused to make myself smaller to accommodate Tyler's insecurity or your control issues." James nodded slowly, more tears falling. "Strong," he agreed. "Always. Strong. I built a good life," I continued. "I have a career, I love friends who support me, achievements I'm proud of. I did that despite you, not because of you." "No," he said, tapping his chest. "Proud of you." The word proud from James's lips struck me as profoundly ironic. For years I had craved approval and recognition from my family, only to be told my achievements were problematic. Now, when I no longer needed his validation, he offered it freely. "I don't forgive you," I said honestly. "Not yet, maybe not ever completely. What you did affected me deeply. I've spent years in therapy working through the damage of being told my success was a problem, that I should dim my light for someone else's comfort." James closed his eyes briefly, accepting this without protest. "But," I continued, "I'm willing to acknowledge that you're not the same person now who did those things then. Whether that's because of the stroke or genuine reflection doesn't really matter. I'm not carrying the anger anymore. It doesn't serve me." This felt true as I said it. The anger that had fueled me for years had gradually transformed into something else, a quiet confidence that I had made the right choice, a recognition that I had built a life worth living on my own terms. We talked for another 20 minutes, the conversation halting and sometimes awkward as James struggled to communicate, and I measured my responses carefully. When the nurse returned to check on him, I took it as my cue to leave. "I can't promise what our relationship will look like going forward," I told him as I stood. "But I'm glad we had this conversation." James reached for my hand with his functioning left one. I hesitated before allowing the brief contact. His fingers were cool and papery against mine, nothing like the strong, imposing hands I remembered. "Thank you," he said simply. As we left the facility, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. The confrontation hadn't provided the dramatic catharsis I'd imagined, but something more subtle, and perhaps more meaningful, the recognition that I had outgrown the need for James's approval or acceptance. My mother squeezed my arm as we walked to the parking lot. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. "I think I am." Tyler hung back slightly, giving us space. "Thank you for doing that," he said when we reached our cars. It meant a lot to him, and to me. I nodded, not quite ready for warm familial exchanges, but acknowledging the tentative new understanding between us. "Take care of yourself, Tyler." As I drove home, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this point. 8 years ago, I had ghosted my family to save my future. Today, I had confronted my past on my own terms, from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. The road ahead remained uncertain. I didn't know what kind of relationship, if any, I would choose to have with James as his health continued to decline. My reconnection with my mother was still healing, still fragile in some ways. Tyler and I had reached a tentative truce, but whether that would develop into anything more substantial remained to be seen. What I did know with absolute certainty was that I would never again compromise my light to make others more comfortable with their darkness. That lesson, hard won through pain and separation, was perhaps the most valuable education I had ever received. 1 year after my confrontation with James, my life had found a new equilibrium that included cautious connections with my reformed family alongside the chosen family I had built for myself. James's condition had stabilized but not improved significantly. He remained in assisted living, requiring substantial help with daily activities. I visited occasionally, not out of obligation, but as a choice I made for my own healing journey. Our interactions were never easy, but had evolved into something resembling mutual respect. He would never be a father figure to me, but the active hostility had dissipated, replaced by a complicated peace. My relationship with my mother had deepened and strengthened. She had completed her cancer treatment successfully with good prognosis for full recovery. We had dinner together weekly, and she had become integrated into my broader social circle, joining holiday gatherings and celebrating my professional milestones. The shadow of her former capitulation to James had not entirely disappeared, but she had worked hard to rebuild my trust, always respecting my boundaries and validating my experiences. Tyler and I had developed a cautious friendship, meeting occasionally for coffee to discuss his work with troubled teens or my latest architectural projects. The competitive dynamic James had fostered between us had been replaced by a genuine interest in each other's distinct paths. Tyler had recently celebrated 2 years of sobriety and had enrolled in community college to pursue a degree in counseling, a direction that suited his newfound empathy and self-awareness. Most significantly, I had founded a small scholarship program for high school students from difficult family situations who demonstrated academic promise. Working with my former mentor, Ms. Reynolds, I provided not just financial assistance but mentorship and emotional support for young people navigating challenges similar to those I had faced. The program was modest in scope, but deeply meaningful to me, a way of transforming my painful experiences into something constructive. On a bright spring afternoon, I attended the graduation ceremony for Lucia, one of my first scholarship recipients. She had completed her freshman year of college with honors, defying the odds stacked against her as a former foster child with limited family support. Watching her receive recognition for her achievements filled me with a profound sense of purpose. After the ceremony, my various families converged at a celebration dinner I had arranged at a local restaurant. My mother chatted animatedly with Zoe and my other close friends. Tyler engaged in earnest conversation with Ms. Reynolds about educational resources for at-risk youth. Lucia and 2 other scholarship students shared stories and laughter at the end of the table. Looking around at this unlikely gathering, I felt a sense of wonder at the healing that had taken place. None of these relationships were perfect or uncomplicated, but they were authentic in a way my family connections had never been during those toxic years under James's influence. Later that evening, Tyler found me alone on the restaurant's patio, taking a moment of quiet reflection. "Quite a group you've assembled," he observed, leaning against the railing beside me. I nodded. "Not what I would have predicted a few years ago." "You've created something remarkable, Angelina," he said sincerely. "Not just your career, but this community. These kids look at you the way I should have, as an inspiration rather than a threat." We were both victims of a toxic dynamic, I acknowledged. James pitted us against each other for his own purposes. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking a lot about cycles lately, how patterns repeat through generations, unless someone consciously breaks them. In my work with these kids, I see it all the time. Parents who were never supported themselves don't know how to support their children." "Are you worried about repeating James's patterns?" I asked, curious about this new perspective. "Every day," he admitted. "That's why I stay in therapy, why I work my program. I never want to be the kind of father who builds himself up by tearing others down." This vulnerable admission from the person who had once been my tormentor illustrated how profoundly things had changed. We had both broken free from the roles assigned to us in our dysfunctional family script. "For what it's worth," I told him, "the fact that you're aware of those patterns gives you a much better chance of breaking them." The meaningful conversation with Tyler confirmed something I had been feeling increasingly over the past year. Ghosting my family had been necessary for my survival and growth. Had I stayed, had I accepted the limitations they tried to impose, I would have been diminished in ways that might have been irreparable. The distance, both physical and emotional, had allowed me to develop my strengths without constant undermining. It had given me space to recognize toxic patterns and build healthier relationships. Most importantly, it had taught me that I didn't need to set myself on fire to keep others warm, a lesson that continued to serve me in every aspect of my life. My mother joined us on the patio, her hair now grown back in soft silver waves around her face. "Everything okay out here?" "Just reflecting on journeys," I said, smiling at her. "How far we've all come." She squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of you, Angelina. Not just for your professional success, but for your strength in walking away when you needed to, and your grace in allowing new possibilities when the time was right." Her words touched me deeply. The unconditional support I had craved for so long, finally offered without qualification or comparison. As we rejoined the gathering inside, I carried with me the profound understanding that family could be both biological and chosen, that boundaries were acts of self-love rather than selfishness, and that standing up for one's right to shine was never wrong. The stepfather who wanted me to quit school because his son was jealous had inadvertently taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that my education, not just academic but emotional and spiritual, was indeed the one thing no one could take away from me. By ghosting them years ago, I had protected that precious resource, allowing it to flourish and eventually create ripples that would help others protect their own light as well. Has anyone else had to make a difficult choice to protect their education or future? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories of overcoming family challenges. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to set boundaries even when it's painful. Thank you for being here with me today, and I wish you all the courage to stand in your own light.